Joe's not going to be running the government. He's just going to be sitting in a home someplace.
I can hardly wait to debate him on stage. I want people to see me standing next to him and him standing next to me. We'll see who's sleepy.
Mr. Vice President, thank you. Thanks for your time. Please come back in less than 13 years, sir.
All right, Chuck. Thank you very much.
All right. It's Chris, but anyway.
Chris. I just did Chris. No, I just did Chuck. I tell you what, man.
I just spoke at Dartmouth on health care at the medical school, or not, I guess I wasn't actually on the campus, but the people from the medical school were at the, I want to be clear, I'm not going nuts. I'm not.
And by the way, the idea that these breakthroughs we have with the whole, the whole, immune system. In fact, allow people. Time's up. I agree that everybody, once they, in fact, they should. Anyway, my time's up. Go to Joe 30330. Pick up your phone now. Send a text to the word United to the number 30330. 30330 or 303-330 or BOO. Wait. You got it. It's on the back there. Play the radio. Make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night. Think about it. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing. I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again. They'd look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on.
Spread your legs.
Trust.
Like his strange hold on Defense Secretary Ash Carter's wife, Stephanie. Bizarre variety, it's raising questions about appropriate.
It's a large, very identifiable Somali community. There's an awful lot who are driving cabs.
Only 15 Somalis live in the entire state, according to the Census Bureau. And Wilmington cab drivers told CNN they knew of no Somalis driving taxis.
The reason I did what I'm doing is because there's an invasion of Hispanics. They're going to put you all back in chains.
I mean, you got the first sort of mainstream African American who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice-looking guy. I mean, that's a story.
You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking. Chuck, stand up. Chuck, let him see you. Oh, God love you. What am I talking about? I tell you what, you're making everybody else stand up, though, pal. A lot about it. His mom lived in Long Island for 10 years or so. God rest her soul. And although your mom's still alive as your dad passed. Excuse me, I got to get this right.
And why should the voters believe that you can win the national election?
I was a Democratic caucus. You ever been to a caucus? No, you haven't. You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier.
You're a damn liar, man. That's not true. And no one has ever said that?
No man has a right to raise a hand to a woman in anger. And so we have to just change the culture, period. And keep punching at it and punching at it and punching at it.
If you want to check my shape on it, let's do push-ups together here, man. Let's run. Let's do whatever you want to do.
It is important that Iowa and Nevada have spoken, but look. Get your work straight, Jack. I'm Jill Biden's husband, and I work for Cedric Richmond.
I'm Hunter.
Are you joking? No. You're too old to go for it. Granddaughters not only love their dads, their grandpops, they always like them, and that's the great thing. Thank you, baby. Thanks. Anything to report? Successful dump. I dropped everything at the dump. It all worked out. And by the way, I got a second load. Guys coming. Anybody wants to help me unload? And Corn Pop was a bad dude. And he ran a bunch of bad boys. Speak softly and carry a big stick. End of quote. I promise you, the president has a big stick.
Joe, you want to administer the oath?
My memory is not as good as Justice Roberts, Chief Justice Roberts. Does anyone?
Thank you, Dr. Pepper, and thank you, Chancellor, or Dr. Paper.
Barack America. By the way, this is my little sister, Valerie, and I'm Jill's husband. Oh, no, this is oh, you switched on me.
Look, the whole idea is he's got to get in place things that were shortages of. I did insist. I suggested that we should have people in China at the outset of this event, and when it all started in Luhan province.
I propose, and I'm going to digress slightly. We're in a situation. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
We can speak out and be more straightforward.
Senator John, I mean, but I mean, think of, I mean, it's not about, I know.
To win.
And hedge out of $1.6 trillion worth, $1.4 trillion worth, out of $1.4 trillion. It's about $740 billion over time.
LGBTQ people have no civil rights.
Iraq, I mean, excuse me, in terms of what was going on.
My long friend, time friend, and she's a friend. She's been my friend.
Because think of what's been adopted. Milton Friedman's notion.
In the late 80s, when they adopted Milton Friedman's notion, the stance where we've adopted Milton Friedman. Now, if in fact you are in a position, but President Trump and the demagogues around. But if Donald Trump, psychiatric, the International Organization of Psychiatrists, I forget the formal name of it. This is not a Republican talking point. The UAW took incredible. I never ever thought that I'd see what I saw in Charlotte. I'm not going to be a mule. I got something to do. I got to go do boom, boom, boom. If we just were to reinstitute the CAFE standards.
And I think Secretary, excuse me, I wasn't.
That's exactly what Rock and I talked about in the beginning.
Donald Trump does pose an extra threat to this. It's not hypothetical.
We'll have a mechanism to control drug prices. You know, it's not. We're no longer using chemical-based things. All this thing we're dealing with.
You know how many tax loopholes there are in the code now? Yeah. 1,640 billion. Eliminate one. Bobby Kennedy and Dr. King had been assassinated in the 70s, late 70s, when I got engaged. 1787. That was a time in the late 60s, the early 60s and 60s where
We hold these truths self-evident.
poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. Here in Miami, in Florida, you don't have a, and that is if you keep.
In terms of the Ku Klux Klan and
Studies have marked,
65 out of every 100 jobs today require training beyond high school.
my wife, who is a teacher, she's teaching now. She's back in the classroom at a community college where she teaches.
You had over 40 kids shot at Kent State on a beautiful lawn. The next morning, what's wrong? I said, your dad can't sleep. He's just staring at the ceiling thinking, what happens?
First speech stood up. The former chancellor of Germany.
You had people like you had people like the former chairman and leader of the party in Germany. You had Angela Merkel stand up and say how terrible it was. I mean, well, look, this is beyond the scope of anything remotely what we've seen before.
We provide efficiency for appliances. That saves billions of gallons of gasoline. I mean, billions of $2.3 billion worth of, $500 billion in savings and 2-something billion metric tons of CO2 going in the air.
Where an overwhelming number of families, ICE walks into a small Mississippi town, and in fact, arrests hundreds of workers. I was with a world leader in Indonesia. What's not to like about Vermont in terms of the beauty of it? And what a neat town. I mean, this is sort of a scenic, beautiful town.
Wait. Take your AR-14s and what?
Okay, this is not okay. Hold on. All right.
Hey, let's don't tell me that you want to go outside.
There's a lot of guys. A lot of guys wanted. Both targeting you over this exchange this morning with the voter about guns. Any regrets about how you handled it?
Well, I'm surprised that Sanders is joining Trump. It's just surprising.
Wasn't it appropriate to swear at an American, though, especially a union voter?
Look, tomorrow's Superstar Tuesday, and I want to thank you all. I tell you what, I'm rushing ahead, aren't I? 150 million people have been killed since 2007 when Bernie voted to exempt the gun manufacturers from liability. It would put 720 million women back in the workforce.
Nobody should be in jail for a nonviolent crime.
My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. And I said, what am I going to do? He said, come down here in the basement where where all the pool filter is. But I'm going to wrap this chain around your head. I said, you kidding me? And those days used to remember the straight razor. You'd bang them on the curb, get them rusty, put them in a rain barrel, get them rusty.
Mr. Biden, they say these gaps in your electability.
Well, that's what we determine pretty soon, won't it?
Thank you all. Thank you all for listening. Oh. Thanks. Okay.